Hello, everyone. Meteorologist Mike here, and I wanted to do something a little bit different today. Don't worry, your regular forecast video will be coming up later today. However, I wanted to talk a bit about this past storm Sunday into Monday and a bit about why it was such a challenge for forecasters to figure out what was going on. And unfortunately, was not thinking about this last week. Otherwise, I would have saved data, but I only thought about this as the storm was going on and lost power, like most of you, throughout the day yesterday. So I only was able to start collecting data today, and sadly, meteorologists don't keep around past model data for very long. So I don't have an entirely complete picture of what I was looking at, but I've got enough to get the story going. Unfortunately, we do have to start on Tuesday instead of Monday, as once again, I do not have the data back from Monday. I just have Tuesdays here. So we are going to start with Tuesday, the 12Z and the 18Z. The 12Z and the 18Z GFS is accurate for what I look at when I'm creating my forecast videos for you all, as that is the latest model data that has come out at that time. Every once in a while, I do get an 18Z ECMWF, but that just depends on how quick the computer, those supercomputers feel like spitting out the data. So for the look back period, I'm gonna be sticking with the 12Z. Now on Monday, I do take note. I do know that I took note that there was a system rolling through on Sunday, and that for it being 6 days out, I am aware that models tend to be very fickle at that time frame, and just note that there is a system rolling through. Put a bit of precipitation in the 7 day, and we roll on into the next day. Tuesday is when I start looking a little bit more at details, and just note how different the models are. The GFS likes to wants to bring this storm in close to land, give us a nice and deep core right off the shore, giving us plenty of precipitation and wind. While the Euro is sending the low pressure center well off the coast, going to give us a little bit of rain and a little bit of snow. So at this point, I'm going to keep precipitation in the forecast, maybe throw in a snowflake along with the raindrops, but I'm not going to go into much details here in the forecast quite yet. Fast forward to Wednesday, the GFS is keeping with its story, keeping the center of pressure right off the coast, and has actually made the center of pressure even stronger, while the Euro has actually sent the center of pressure even farther off the coast and only has given us a little bit of rain. Now, there are two things that I need to note. One is for the GFS specifically. The GFS likes to make these strong storms and then at the last minute back out of them and go a little bit closer to what the Euro likes to do. And that is something that as a forecaster that I need to know and I need to prepare for, because following closely with what the GFS is doing and then backtracking immediately is an easy way to lose trust from you all and just not be known as a good forecaster. So I need to be aware of that. Something else that I need to be aware of is generally with models that they like to go back and forth a little bit between runs. And with the Euro sending this even farther out from shore, that is something that I am thinking about. Why is it sending it farther out from shore? And in the next run, is it going to come back a little bit? Is it going to send us a bit more precipitation in the next run? So at this point, I'm actually not making changes in my 7 day. I'm keeping it as it was in the previous, but at this point, I'm starting to make you all aware that I'm keeping an eye on a potential system rolling through the region at the end of the weekend And I'm not going into any more details because, once again, we're still have a lot of differences. Fast forward another 24 hours on Thursday, the GFS is still not really changing its story. It still has this very strong center right off the coast, giving us plenty of rain and wind, and snow. The Euro has come back a little bit closer to the shore and is actually making the center of pressure stronger, making it much more of a closed system, as well as giving us more precipitation. We're back to rain into a little bit of snow. However, we still have quite a bit of differences. So now I want a little bit more data. And so I go to what's called my ensembles. Every time a computer model runs, it actually runs multiple different times with slightly different starting parameters. And this gives us a more complete idea of what could possibly happen. And that's what's on your screen right now. Each one of these little numbers, it's each one of those little runs or members where they think the center of pressure is going to be at this time. And the big number is quite simply the mean. And I want to take a closer look at where these numbers are. And you see it's a bit all over the place. Unfortunately, this is not the exact run that I was looking at this time, because once again, we do not have I do not have access to all of the data. This was the 0Z from that morning instead of the 12 or 18Z from later that day. And I do remember that there was one member, and only one member, that was a lot closer to deterministic, had the center pressure right offshore. So that's something that I note, and so that is something that I note. Only one member is following the deterministic. So that means that it is less likely that the deterministic, or what I show you, this singular model, is likely to happen. So it is less likely to happen, along with the general bias that the GFS backtracks at the last minute, makes me lean a lot more closely to what the CMWF is going to say. So now I feel that I can start telling you guys that we are going to get some rain that will transition to a bit of snow overnight, and that is it. That is the story. I'm not going to show you anything quite yet, just because of how much of a difference is between these two models, but I am going to that is going to be my forecast. Fast forward another 24 hours, and the Euro has had quite a change of heart. It's brought the center of pressure a lot closer inland, and that is starting to raise all the red flags, because obviously that's not what normally happens. It's normally the opposite. And so now we're starting to go into a bit of panic mode, because we have quite a different story. This is now a strong system closer to shore that's going to give us rain into snow, and this snow is going to last overnight now. And so I want to go back and check my data. Once again, taking a look at the ensembles, and we do have this one member that's a lot closer to shore. However, something to note is that everything you're seeing is pressure related, the lines and the colors. And I want to take a look at the difference, and you see there's a lot less color here 24 hours ago and a lot more color at the current one. That means that we have lower pressures right off the coast, so a stronger storm right off the coast. So now alarm bells are starting to ring, and I am going to start looking. Yes, alarm bells are starting to ring. So now I need to start talking about a storm, and a storm that's going to start off rain and transition to snow. Unfortunately, we still don't have as much agreement as I would like, especially when it comes to timing of the system, but it's enough. It's enough that I can start talking about a storm, but it's not enough that I can actually start talking about snowfall totals. Even though I know that's what you want, it is something that I need to start researching, because one of the things I like to do is talk about it when I go into my creating my totals, is I want to consider trends. So I take a look. What is the GFS saying? 20 inches, as you can see here, 2022. And that is something to know. Unfortunately, I don't have the euros, so you're only going to have to take my word on it. The euro, 2 to 4. And once again, I'm left with this giant difference in snowfall totals. So I can only tell you guys the general idea of what's going to happen, and I still can't quite tell you much when it comes to details. Fast forward another 24 hours, and now we get into a bit more of what is actually going to happen, because we have a lot more agreement. That was not the button. There we are. We have a lot more agreement. We'll start with the GFS because that one is easy. That's not right. Easy. Because that's the current run. Is it? No. 18 Saturday. There we go. GFS hasn't really changed. Starting off with rain and transitioning to snow in the early afternoon. 18Z is 1 p.m. here on the peninsula. And you see northern half is already under snow. And that snow continues throughout the night with some very heavy snow. You see those darker blues, and continues on into Monday, lasting into Monday evening. Once again, we want to focus on the general idea with these models. When it comes to the euro, once again, starting off rain. Okay, good. We have that. The center of pressure is very close to the peninsula. Okay, we are agreeing on that. However, notice the time. It's 21Z. That's 4 o'clock, and we're still all under rain. Oh boy. We don't transition until the evening here under the euro. Oh boy. And that is big. Right around the center of pressures is where you're going to have a lot of your moisture and a lot of your wind. So if we have a 6-hour difference, you can already start to imagine that we have quite the difference in how much snow we're going to get. So that's already in the back of my mind here. In the evening, we transition. We continue to see some heavy snow in the night, as well as some strong winds. By this point in time, the National Weather Service has issued a blizzard warning, so that coincides with that. And we continue to see that snow last into Monday morning as well as Monday afternoon. And by the evening, we're done. Okay. The general story, all coming together, except for when. When does the snowfall start? There's still this 6-hour time period, this 6-hour difference. So I know that, and I'm going to be thinking about that even when I take a look at these snowfall totals. And I know that because of that 6-hour difference, I'm already expecting to see quite the difference in these snowfall totals. Now, something to know, 11, 16, maybe we're up to 20 here in off the coast with that darker green. Okay, so we've come down a bit here with our snowfall totals from the GFS. Good to note. Euro has come up. We're at 10 inches, 12 here on the coast. Okay, good to know. The euro has come up. However, we still have this 10-inch difference. This 10-inch difference to deal with. And some things to know. Less snow as we head down south. That is something that I need to know, especially down here. or in this mapping. Unfortunately for Virginia, this map doesn't show what happens down there. Uh, when it comes to snowfall totals, it's just because of the resolution of the map. It doesn't. Virginia's too small, basically, for the map to recognize that it should put a pixel there, and that is very sad. So GFS has come up. GFS has come down a bit. Euro has come up a bit. It's at this point in time, the GFS actually isn't the snowiest. It is actually the NAM. The NAM 12Z is the snowiest at 26, almost 30, over 2 feet of snow from the NAM. Now, something to note, I know as a forecaster, the NAM here is a cold and wet model, so it over exaggerates what happens with snow. So I expect this. However, this has been a switch. The GFS up to now has been the snowier of the models, and now the NAM has taken back over. So I know GFS is coming down, Euro is coming up, so I want to be in between them with my forecast, and that's where this snow forecast came from. I knew that down south they were going to be seeing less snow, so Virginia got to 1 to 6, and everywhere else, in mostly Wakefield, is now in 6 to 10 down in Maryland, and everyone in the Mount Holly National Weather Service, I said 10 to 15. Once again, note this was 24 hours out. I did not update this forecast here on Sunday. And let's take a look at the snow reports, and just a bit of comparison here. I didn't do too bad in Wakefield. You see, I over-exaggerated a bit for most of Virginia, but it wasn't too bad. You went well over up in Wallops and Chincoteague, but overall, not terrible. You mostly stayed in my 1 to 6 range. And even in my 6 to 10 outside of the coast, which got a very heavy band during the day, actually in the overnight hours, you mostly stayed inside my 6 to 10 range. So that wasn't too bad. However, up north in Mount Holly, that was quite a different story. And this goes back to that transition time. What actually happened is we started to see a transition early in the afternoon. In fact, in 12:30, I started seeing snowflakes outside my window. And once again, that 6 hours of difference just goes to show. So you see, Train Spotter in Woodside, 20 inches. Felton, Train Spotter, 17.5. Down in Sussex, Train Spotter, 21 inches in Long Neck. Georgetown, Train Spotter, 19. I measured 13 and a third at my house. So I was well below those and in my range, but other than that, there was plenty of areas that I did bust with the forecast, unfortunately. But once again, just a couple hours difference is what created that difference with the snowfall forecast. So I hope y'all learned a little bit more about what goes into making a forecast and why it can be a challenge. Just note, this storm did not behave. The models leading up to this storm did not behave as they normally do. 9 times out of 10, this wouldn't happen. It'd actually be the opposite of how they behaved. The GFS would have pulled back multiple days ago, and the Euro would have been more like the vigilant guard who just stands there and doesn't doesn't budge. However, we got the exact opposite, and that delayed us. That delayed us in figuring out what was happening and why it was happening, and delayed the snowfall forecast, and actually made me be a bit more conservative. And I hope you all now have a better understanding as to what goes into these forecasts and how it can be challenging at different times. So thank you all for watching. Once again, the regular forecast will be out at its normal time in just a little bit.